class of 2025 is live.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste, and alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Brian Gebhardt. Now, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. And, of course, our Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So who's the dog who will have a breakout season? We'll talk about it in Next Up. And does that antitrust settlement with the NCAA really provide a path for schools managing NIL? We'll go between the hedges to discuss. But first, let's talk about UGA being in that number one spot yet again. So, Brian, five-star linebacker Zayden Walker committed to Georgia coming off his official visit to Athens. He is considered by many recruiting outlets as the number one linebacker in the country. He was the first public commitment from a big recruiting weekend for UGA, and the Dogs now have reached 11 commitments in the class of 2025. So what's the biggest win with Georgia in snagging Zayden Walker?
Yeah, huge get for the Dogs in a position that they've always been really, really good at. We've talked a lot this offseason about CJ Allen, the incoming sophomore. He played as a true freshman last year and had a big impact. But it seems like it's every 2 or 3 years, right, where it's like, okay, time for Georgia to get that number one linebacker in the country again. So maybe it was every other year, you know, with having CJ Allen going back to 2 years ago in that group. But he's a guy who's very versatile. You know, a lot of people have actually compared him to Jalen Walker and his development, hoping he can come along and progress in a way like that. And it's interesting, too, when you go to see what other schools were involved. And I think this is what's big, and it'll be with some of the other names we'll talk about here, too, is Georgia would get most of these guys, or at least like half of these guys. But the school that they would always lose out to is Alabama. So Zayden Walker's number 2 school, and one of the ones in the mix was Alabama. And I think all those ones that may have been 50-50 or even swaying like 60-40 Georgia's way the last couple of years, they're just all going to Georgia, where they would go to Alabama or maybe go to Clemson, but we're seeing them lose out on some of the 5-star bigger names and stuff like that. So huge get and great look here for the Dogs.
You know, one thing, BG, is that I've always been fascinated by Kirby Smart, because when you think about getting the number one linebacker in the country, Zayden Walker, you know, 6'2", 220, he's a guy who's been listed as an edge guy, but here's where Kirby comes in. Here's why I feel like players are being fascinated, right, when they walk on Georgia's campus, because Kirby has a plan for those guys to get to the next level. And when you're talking about a guy being 6'2", 220, that's not an ideal edge rusher in the NFL. I know means. So and then to be able to have guys who are in that same situation, like BG mentioned with Jalen Walker. We can even go back pull another Walker, Quay Walker. He was the same way, a guy who ended up being drafted in the first round in the 2022 draft with the Green Bay Packers. So, you know, he has a model already there. The precedent has been set, you know, already. And you can look at it, hey, here's what I did for Quay, here's what I'm doing for Jalen, and here's what I can do for you. And he said, you know what? Oh, that makes sense, right? And when you have a coach like Smart coming in and setting these plans for these guys when they come in on these visits or the official visits, it's just, I'm not surprised at all that he's racking up in his 2025 class.
Yeah, one of the other things, too, that's been really impressive from Kirby and this linebacking core is just the ability to actually kind of move guys around. Maybe someone comes in as a traditional, you know, Mike, and then they move him to the outside, or maybe he puts his hand, maybe he does actually rush the passer, even though he's not an ideal pass rusher at some point. And I think that versatility is also appealing to players. Hey, we're gonna show off your strengths and get you in the best spot possible, but we also might let you do this and let you do that just to kind of see what fits best for us and fits best for you. And I think that idea of being a little bit open-minded and versatile with it, instead of, all right, you're going to come in, you're going to play just like this. And he's been not as rigid as maybe some of the like old school thought of what Kirby is as a coach has been on that defensive side. He's willing to adapt and to change and to move around. And that helps these guys out, show off all of their skill sets before they get drafted.
And you hear that consistent message when these guys are speaking to various outlets on why they made the decision to go to Athens, it's always that same conversation: what he can do for them on and off the field, how he can help them with their versatility, and most importantly, how he can help them to get to that next level, because he's already done that for so many others. So it's like you don't have to kind of sell that point. The point sells itself, not just in this recent draft, but to your point, Jarvis, really the past 4, 5, 6 drafts, or really since Kirby Smart has been at the helm in Athens. Now, speaking of another good get, Christian Avenue defensive lineman Christian Garrett, who's ranked as a top 15 D lineman in the nation, decided he couldn't wait any longer after his official visit to UGA this past weekend. He, of course, is a 4-star recruit. He became that 11th commitment to the 2025 class. And like you said, Brian, he beat out Clemson, Georgia Tech, Tennessee when he made his decision. But Jarvis, how important is this to the D-line class that Coach Trey Scott is building up for next season?
Yeah, it's vital, right? Like the more, like I said, talk about Kirby Smart, talking to guys. Of course, Glenn Schumann is the inside linebacker coach, so he's just been bringing in guys all over the place, right? It's the same thing for Coach Scott, because when you think about all of the defensive linemen who's going in the draft, high in the draft, right? It's just easy for him to be able to do it, and then just watching Mr. Garrett's film, we'll call him Mr. Garrett, get a little respect for the man before I make a little fun of him. Like, you talking about, see this man out on the field, at this little private school, 1A school, he just is bigger than everybody. Everybody. No one wants to block this cat. Like, you just say certain plays where for a fact, I'm like, man, you're supposed to block him. And then the guys just kind of just magically kind of just slide on up out the way. Like, all right, cool. I'm going to go get this TFL, and go on about my business. So, but yeah, I feel like he definitely has the size and the girth to kind of, come into that weight room and get right and get in that system. And like I said, be up under Coach Scott and be the guy be another one of those guys to, hey, just get in line, wait your turn. Once you get on, you ball, and then you go to the draft. It's just easy, like a little conveyor belt, just coming in through Athens, going into the league.
Based on some of those matchups too in that region, some of the film that you had watched, they may have called him Mr. Garrett too. Like they
had no choice.
The players called him, maybe some of the other coaches and all that type of thing. But no, this is one of those things that Georgia fans it's weird, right? Because it's been an embarrassment of riches in general with the defensive line over the last 5, 6, 7 years. But last year was sort of this down year. So, and granted, this is a 2025 recruit, but fans are looking, going, all right, where's our Jordan Davis? Where's our Jalen Carter? Where's our, but that's what was brought. So now, fans expect, all right, where are our 2 middle first round, defensive linemen? Because that's what Georgia fans expect now at this point. And it's like, all right, bringing in another 4-star. All right, what's he going to be? Is he going to be another guy? And that's one thing that they've really been looking at, fans, as far as, all right, is this defensive line going to get back to being what it was a couple of years ago in that historic 2021 season?
Indeed. Now, you talk about an embarrassment of riches. Ellis Williams personifies that particular statement, because once again, the Dogs get a list of commits to include that 5-star recruit out of Camden County, another big tight end, another big athlete, Jarvis, that speaks to that whole piece of embarrassment of riches. And like you said, we're talking about, that class of 2025 that just continues to just stack up for these Dogs.
Yeah, 6'7", 235 pounds. Like, oh yeah, he's an anomaly, right? There used to be a guy by the name of Darnell Washington who was 6'8", by 265, 270. So yeah, they're used to dealing with guys of that ilk, right? Or dealing with those tight ends. So, and then you had guys like Brock Bowers who's come through, and obviously he probably one of the better tight ends, if not athletes, in Georgia history, right? When you think about what he was able to bring to the table and turn around and hand the ball off and take it to the house for 50, 60 yards for a touchdown. Yeah. So I think that it's another one of those easy sales. It's easy. It just makes so much sense for him to come down to Georgia and say, hey, we're going to get you into our offense and we're going to bulk you up so you can be able to block as well. And then because those type of tight ends that can block and catch passes out in the open field, those are the guys that they value the most when it comes to going to that next level.
It just kind of puts into perspective what a wild week it's been for Georgia in terms of the recruiting weekend they had. These guys that are coming in, it's like, okay, number one linebacker in the country, one of the best defensive linemen, and one of the best tight ends. He's right up there at the top. I mean, this is a big recruit who's been really productive.
Number one tight end in the country, yeah.
And to that point of like, all right, here are the guys that we're going to come in and try to make you put you in this spot. This is what it is, and it's another great weapon in what's become a tight end factory. And then Georgia's become running back U, LBU, tight end U, and and secondary is right there as far as the safety go. So it's just another spot where it's like, yeah, if you're a tight end, go to Georgia. All right, now if you're a linebacker, it's starting to become half of the roster where it's like, oh yeah, you play this position, go to Georgia. It's gonna be the best fit for you. So another great get for Kirby and the guys.
Indeed. And another haul for them. It continued on Monday. Of course, we found out that Valdosta High's 3-star athlete Todd Robinson also committed to the program. Now, does the antitrust settlement with the NCAA really provide a path for schools managing NIL? We'll go between the hedges to discuss. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and free. But it's not just a job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job boards. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. And that is why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. They also try to come up with unique ways to help you with the hiring process. They just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, which makes the process even easier and even quicker. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. So you can solve that problem by going with linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. So, guys, the NCAA, of course, announced last month it agreed to terms to settle 3 federal antitrust cases that loomed as the most immediate threats to the future of that association. Now, as part of that settlement, the NCAA will pay former athletes nearly $2.8 billion in back damages. Also, schools will be allowed to share roughly $20 million per year starting in 2025 directly with their athletes. In exchange, those plaintiffs dropped their cases. And that's a good thing, because even though that 2.8 million back damages, billions rather, in back damages seems like a lot, could have totaled up to 20 billion, to be honest, Jarvis. So the NCAA president, Charlie Baker, said the settlement will put financial pressure on everyone in the college sports industry. But what do you feel about this? I mean, do you feel the same way?
Yeah, it's going to put a lot of pressure on people who should have had some type of sense of urgency of getting some control over this thing for like the past 50 years, right? It's just this archaic system that's been in play with the whole student athlete type situation. And Baker even talked about how, when it comes to collectively bargaining and maybe seeing if the judge would give them some type of leeway to where they can't be employees, but they can collectively bargain with them, which is something that I've never heard of before, right? Yeah. How can you do that? How does that work? I know T, your HR background, I don't know if that's going to work. Like, how you going to make that work? So I just feel like, this is Charlie Baker has a big poopy situation going on, and he's trying to navigate through it. Like, he's got one part of it, right? Because you're talking about $20 billion. Can the NCAA even exist after trying to figure out how to pay that off, right? So I think they got that part out. Now that they've gotten that part out of the way, now they got to figure out, okay, how can we kind of manage this thing? You got the millions of dollars, right? With, that's going to be going to the schools in 2025. Here's another issue, Title IX. How do you do that? like, because we understand the revenue sports, are going to get their fair share, but how is those non-revenue sports that involve women, how are they going to deal with that? So I feel like this is one part is out the way, but it is like they ain't got nowhere near through the storm yet.
Oh yeah, and it's true, Jarvis. That's a great point, because on the heels of that announcement that we got from Charlie Baker that the antitrust settlement was settled, then you get word that basically it's kind of class action, because there are multiple former NC State athletes from that Wolfpack team of 1983 that won that NCAA basketball championship who are now suing. So yeah, you're right. Like, it's still something that they've got to get ahead of, and they've got to figure this out, because you don't want that to start becoming a trend. But that is something that you have to deal with, not just the moving forward of how you deal with the situation, but you've got to look at the backstory of it as well.
I don't know how Mark Emmert didn't have to deal with all this stuff. Like, we got Charlie Baker there.
He had to. He
took his head and did this.
He was like, "I'm out. I'm gone. See ya."
Yep.
That was it.
Yep.
He really did that to everybody. He goes, "Oh, all the problems that I just ignored for forever and collected checks because of March Madness, and didn't do anything of any sort of leadership or form or any sense of anything that is part of my job. Then I'm just out, and then this guy's got to deal with it." So I feel terrible on that front for him, but I don't know what's going to happen. I think anybody who says that they do, like, we're going to have so much fallout from this, and there's going to be plenty of negative stories too, right? There's going to be programs that are going to get canceled. There's going to be a lot of programs that wind up going into being club sports because they realize they can't afford it. Because there are, a lot of times as we talk, this is a Georgia focused podcast, and we talk a lot of SEC and Big Ten and Power 5 schools and that sort of thing. But there are so many schools and so many programs that probably aren't going to find a way to come up with $20 million to spread this across all the different ones. So you feel for them, because over the next 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to see programs, both men's and women's, in various at various levels, just wind up getting canceled because of this whole situation. So it's definitely a mess from that front, and I'm fascinated to see how it works. And to your point, Jarvis, too, you brought up the fact of, like, the moneymakers are football and basketball. There's only a handful of programs in certain schools that make money in other ways, and it's like, all right, how much are they going to take versus spreading this out versus everybody else? And I think it's going to be an issue that's going to take a lot more than 1 or 2 years to figure out.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see as well, although we know that, like I said, this is more forward thinking, right, and dealing with the here and now. But I'm very intrigued to see what happens with this lawsuit from the 1983 NC State Wolfpack team and how it might impact other groups or other individuals coming out of the woodwork to sue the NCAA, and how that's going to impact what they're able to do. Because I think that's a layer that, to be honest, other than the Ed O'Bannon situation, which really started this whole trickle down of NIL, going back, we really haven't seen a lot of pushback from former athletes, but this one's going to be big. I don't think this one is going to go away anytime soon. The other thing Baker said was that he believes the settlement, and that kind of goes to your point, BG, will create more certainty for schools to plan for a new system that will allow them to share more money with their athletes. But I think you might be right, and I think Jarvis might be right as well, because I don't think this development will really help these programs necessarily develop the right system for profit sharing, because what Charlie Baker is proposing isn't really sensical to me. So I don't know how this can help them in creating those programs and kind of providing a sense of certainty or assuredness.
Yeah, that's why it's so difficult, right? Because this is something that you've never done before. Like I said, you've been used to a certain type of way, a certain line of thinking. Like, people are going to change their perspective on this. There's going to have to be a paradigm shift, go on right now. I mean, you even see coaches like, Dabo Swinney, who still trying to figure out, like, he don't even like the transfer portal. Like, come on, dude, it's time to catch up. Like, hey, man, you're not going to be around long enough if you continue to do this. So when you talk about just on that level, then now you're talking about admin and presidents and chancellors who have to make all these decisions, saying, okay, what are we supposed to do? And how are we going to keep these guys from being employees? Because, that's just been our model for forever. Before you and I, either one of us were born. Anybody was born, really.
Right.
When you think about it, so I think this is something that they're going to, like I said, Baker's going to earn this check. I think Mark Emmert was just collecting checks and just kicking it, right? And then say student athletes, they're not employees. And now Baker is just like, all right, can they not have employee status? And then we can collect the bargain with them. So like I said, this is going to be very interesting to watch. And you know what? I'm here for it because I love chaos. Let's go. Y'all figure it out.
You have always said that sometimes you need chaos in order to bring change. So you probably are going to have to see chaos come over and over again in these next couple of years just to make sure that the foot stays on the gas and that the NCAA is held accountable for making change.
Yeah. And I'm really interested too, just going back to a point that you had made about the NC State team, like whatever happens with that is going to be very interesting and have a big impact on a ton of, like, you think of the Fab Five and Johnny Football and just
UNLV, Larry Johnson, Stacey Ogman,
Reggie Bush, and like just all these different entities. And then how far does that go back? Because we're talking about a team from 1983. That's 41 years ago. So are we going to go back to the 60s and the 70s and then just think about all those teams from in between? That it's wild to think about how much can go on. I don't know. I'm definitely not a legal expert or anything. I don't see how the NC State thing's going to work out. Like, I don't know what they're looking for or how that's going to happen. I think that's going to get settled for something very low and then kind of keep it moving. But who knows? Because if that thing winds up blowing up, that could change things even more. So
exactly. And I think to your point, even if it does end up in a small settlement, it's going to end up in a settlement nonetheless. And that's just going to be an opportunity where someone is sitting at home on the couch from one of those teams that you just mentioned saying, hey, if they can get theirs, we should get ours as well. So yeah, I think that is literally just kind of scratching the surface and is going to add one more layer of complexity to this whole NIL deal. Now, speaking of complexity, to us, it's not that complex. It's actually rather simple on who the dog is that will have a breakout season coming up in 2024. We'll talk about it, though, on the other side and next up. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is also brought to you by FanDuel. Summertime, of course, means baseball, but also the NBA Finals and so much more. And you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200. You can use it to bet everything from the Finals MVP to who is going to hit one out of the park. So let's see where the numbers are now that we have the Boston Celtics up in a 2-0 lead over the Dallas Mavericks. Jason Tatum is actually still at the top of the list, but he is right there with Georgia's own Jaylen Brown. He, of course, is a Wheeler High alum, and they're both at a plus 145. So either one of those guys right now could be the MVP. Drew Holiday has an outside chance at plus 500, and Luka Doncic is still right in the mix as the series shifts back to Dallas on Wednesday at plus 650. So want to make a few extra bucks? You know where to go. FanDuel.com/LockedOn, and you can add a big win to your summer bucket list. Again, that's FanDuel.com/LockedOn because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. So guys, before we talk a little bit about that freshman who is going to that number one breakout candidate, I wanted to ask you guys real quick as well about the true freshman. I saw an article that highlighted like 100 freshmen across the country, right, that are going to make that impact for the 2024 season. So it made me kind of curious to see, Jarvis, who is that maybe true freshman whom you say, hey, that guy could be that guy who makes an impact as a true freshman for this Dogs team?
Oh, y'all know who my guy is. Joseph Jonah Ajonye. It is going down. Trust me, y'all keep an eye on that cat. He flashed in the spring. He's a guy that I really had my eye on, during the spring, and I feel like he's one of those guys. Not saying he's gonna be a first round draft pick, BG, because like I said, everybody asking like who's gonna be that next guy. I'm not saying that, but I will say he is lining himself up to be one of those guys, to get on that conveyor belt like we talked about to get on to the NFL. So, yeah, I think Joseph Jonah Ajayi is a guy that could definitely keep an eye on come this fall because he is a guy that can be a real impact player for the Bulldogs.
Mm. So sometimes, T, you toss out these questions and we're doing research and I'm pulling it up and I'm looking at the names. And I don't try to do this a lot because if I agree with Jarvis, I agree with Jarvis. Or if I agree with you, I agree with you. But I'm looking, right. Jarvis is going to take Joseph Jonah Ajayi. Let me go with, let me just
Shocking,
focus,
right?
let me just focus on somebody else because I agree. I think that's the answer too. And just based on because what we got coming back at cornerback too, as far as Humphrey and Everett and Harris and some of those guys, it's going to be tough for Ellis Robinson to crack the playing time early, although he's probably my answer just in the sense of this is the highest rated corner Kirby's ever gotten at Georgia. Like, think of all the names that have come through and the players that were just drafted and the career like Lassiter just had and some of these other and Ringo and some of the guys that have come through. He is a higher ranked player than all of those guys. And I think the talent's going to shine and really show through, and he's going to get early playing time and wind up being a starter by the end of the year. So I think it's him ultimately, but I think Joseph Jonah Ajayi, I think he gets a chance early to play because I think Georgia kind of runs this thing away from Clemson in week 1. And then all of a sudden you have Tennessee Tech in week 2, where I think some of these young guys are going to be able to get snaps right away and get them engaged in the season really early. So I think he might pop and be the first name that we hear first, but I think ultimately over time and as we head into the playoffs next season or this coming season, I think it'll wind up being Ellis Robinson. And
hey, listen, here on Locked On Sports today, if you want to hear more about this and some of the other sports that we cover, it's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel that's programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the noise. So Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It, of course, is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And as we continue to talk about these Georgia Dogs, another one that I thought was interesting and rather intriguing to me, Jarvis, was Pro Football Focus. Always love to see what the guys over at PFF have to say. And they named Oscar Delp as one of 10 players who will have a breakout season in 2024. And FYI, they put Brock Vandagriff on that list as well. He, of course, is now over with Kentucky. So my question to you is that your number one breakout candidate for the Dogs, or do you see another player who's more likely to have that breakout season?
It's not Delp because I feel like, Brock Bowers was implemented into this offense because they had to. He's just that type of talent, right? I understand Oscar Delp is very similar in size and build, but I haven't seen Brock Bowers type talent. So I'm going to go with Domonic Lovett because I feel like he and Carson Beck had some really good chemistry last year. And I feel they built on that, during the offseason and on into the spring. So I feel like Domonic Lovett is going to be that guy because he was a number one guy at Mizzou before he transferred. Like, he was used to getting the tater every single time, but he was a guy that came in humble, and just kind of figured his way through this offense, given the type of player that he was playing with, Ladd McConkey and of course Brock Bowers last year. So I feel like this is going to be his year to get his shine on and be that wide receiver one that I feel like he can be, especially when you got a quarterback in Carson Beck who potentially can be a top 5 pick in 2025 draft.
Yeah, I think it's going to be for a lot of the same reasons, same position. I think it's going to be Dillon Bell. And I don't really know what a breakout season looks like for him per se, because I don't think it'll be big, gaudy numbers. But I think there were situations last year, especially down the stretch, where like, oh, he can do this, he can do this, he can do this. He's played every other position. He's stepping into his junior season as well. So it's one of those, okay, he's been around a couple years. He seems to be well trusted. I just think he can kind of do anything they want with him in this offense. He can run any route. He can come, he can be jet sweeps. He can line up as a tight end. Like he was in the backfield a little bit as a running back last year as well. So I just think he's able to do anything that this offense is going to ask him to do. And he might be asked to do several different things in terms of playing different versatile roles. And I think he'll be able to step into that and just be the guy like, okay, here he is again, answering the bell. That's what he's doing.
Oh, so, I like that nigga name now.
I stumbled onto that crappy pun. So there you go. You guys are welcome for that.
Right, you're welcome. Right, exactly. The gift that keeps on giving. This show with the crazy puns. Anyway, listen, the Dogs just missed a chance at history falling to NC State 8-5 in the College World Baseball tournament, if you will, or tournament, if you will, en route to
Super
the
Uber
world.
Duber regional
Exactly,
Fantastimal type
super regional
situation.
thingy, like it. Yeah, no. But on a serious note, you got to salute Charlie Condon. We just wanted to at least acknowledge him before we wrap the show, because wouldn't you know it, he'd have a fitting end to his career at UGA. Not that it's fitting that the Dogs fell short in the super regional to NC State, but that he actually hit a solo home run to wrap that game. It was his 37th of the year. So we know that we will see Charlie Condon at the top of the MLB draft. Thanks for stopping by the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk and a little bit more. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we're free and available wherever you download your podcasts. We'll see you on the Atlanta Sports Party Thursday.